Welcome to the deep dive. You've handed us a towering stack of sources today. And I mean, it covers everything. We've got nuclear-armed nations walking a geopolitical tightrope, some really deep-seated institutional failures and accountability, and a genuinely universe-altering astronomical discovery at the end.
It is a high-stakes stack. Our mission today is to, cut through all that noise and get to the essential strategy behind these events. We're really looking at how immense pressure forces adaptation.
From governments, organizations.
And even celestial bodies, yeah. We have three main areas. First, this idea of strategic autonomy. We're looking at Russia, India, the U.S., and how the EU is dealing with its energy and mineral dependencies.
Okay.
Second, we're going to examine the challenges of accountability and conflict. This will take us from army bases in Kenya to the legal definition of crime on the high seas.
And for the finale.
And finally, we wrap up with some surprising scientific revelations that really challenge the standard model of how things are supposed to work.
Let's not wait then. Let's jump straight to that geopolitical tightrope with India and Russia. President Putin recently made his first visit since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine for their 23rd annual summit. That visit alone felt like a massive symbolic statement.
It absolutely was. And to really get the present, you have to appreciate the profound historical anchor here. This partnership has endured for almost 8 decades.
Right. They officially labeled it a special and privileged strategic partnership back in 2010.
And it wasn't just words. Their relationship goes all the way back to India's independence in 1947. The Soviet Union gave crucial support for industrial development, diplomatic cover, especially around the Kashmir dispute.
But I think people forget that in the 1971 war, when the U.S. and China were backing Pakistan, Moscow was openly supporting India. That creates a level of foundational trust that doesn't just vanish.
It doesn't. And that trust translates directly into, hardened defense and economic links that New Delhi simply can't discard.
We're talking hardware.
Exactly. India is still the biggest international buyer of Russian weapons. Critical systems like the S-400 anti-aircraft missiles, the Sukhoi 57 fighter jets, not to mention cooperation on small modular nuclear reactors. And these deals come with maintenance contracts and parts you just can't get from the West.
And then there's the energy shift. The economic change post-Ukraine is just staggering.
It's massive. Before the war, Russia supplied, maybe 2% of India's crude oil imports?
Something like that, yeah.
Today, it's over 35%. That is a huge portion of their energy security now directly tied to Moscow.
So this is why they're pursuing what they call strategic autonomy. They're trying not to be a pawn in this bigger game.
Precisely. You have to look at their risk assessment. If New Delhi completely isolates Russia to appease the West, they risk pushing Moscow even deeper into an embrace with Beijing.
Which is the one thing India wants to prevent, given their own border tensions with China.
It's their #1 strategic concern. So this puts Washington in a really difficult position.
Because India is resisting U.S. pressure, like the tariffs on Russian oil. But at the same time, they're actively seeking deeper cooperation with the U.S.
Right. There's serious movement on a trade deal, and that huge $1 billion agreement for U.S.-made GE aerospace jet engines for their Tabas fighter jets.
So how do they manage that? How do you manage the optics of buying advanced U.S. military hardware while keeping your main defense supplier, Russia, happy?
It's a multi-vector foreign policy in action. India's argument to the U.S. is basically that its stability and its role as a counterweight to China depends on its existing security architecture, which is heavily Russian.
And Russia's perspective.
Well, Russia is trying to secure its trade, so they're talking about alternative payment systems to get around Western sanctions. They're also actively encouraging India's participation in groups like the SKO and BRICS.
Why?
Because Moscow is also wary of China's growing global influence. They need India in those organizations as a balancing partner.
Meanwhile, the West's stance against Moscow is just hardening, both legally and financially. We saw Ukraine officials calling Putin's latest statements Kremlin claptrap.
And NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte was very clear, saying Ukraine has to be in the strongest position to keep the fight going.
And the EU has made a huge move on energy.
A decisive one. Member states and the parliament have a deal. Full independence from Russian gas before the end of 2027.
What does that actually mean in practice?
It means banning long-term pipeline contracts starting in September 2027 and liquefied natural gas, or LNG, contracts from January 2027.
That sounds definitive. But even as they're cutting energy ties, they have this massive financing problem for Ukraine. The Commission proposed raising $90 billion.
$90 billion, yeah, to cover 2/3 of Ukraine's needs for the next 2 years.
But the mechanism is controversial.
This is where the legal pressure point really shows. The idea is a reparations loan, using the interest from frozen Russian assets in Brussels, but the plan is hitting a wall.
Belgium is pushing back.
Belgium is worried about legal retaliation from Moscow, since most of the assets are held there. But the real roadblock is the European Central Bank. The ECB has flat out opposed the idea. They refuse to be a backstop.
Why is the ECB so resistant? I mean, wouldn't this be a straightforward way to fund the war effort?
Not at all. For them, it's about systemic stability. If the EU sets a precedent of seizing or even just leveraging the sovereign assets, even frozen ones, it could destabilize the euro.
It would spook international investors.
Exactly. They'd worry their own assets could be targeted in some future conflict. The ECB is protecting the integrity of the currency and, international finance law. To them, that's more important than the immediate financing need.
Okay, so speaking of strategic dependencies, Europe is making a similarly aggressive move, but this time on China's dominance in rare earth minerals.
It's the same playbook, really. China supplies over 2/3 of the world's rare earths. They're essential for defense, electronics, EV batteries, everything. And China's recent move to tighten export controls was a huge wake-up call.
And the key isn't just digging them up, it's the refining, right?
That's the real bottleneck.
Right.
China dominates global refining. So Europe is responding by using the weight of its single market. New policies to coordinate purchasing, stockpiling,
And tougher economic measures.
much tougher. Things like anti-dumping duties, blocking foreign takeovers of European companies, and excluding firms from public contracts if they don't meet new supply chain standards.
The investment to build a whole parallel supply chain must be massive.
It is. They've set up a strategic fund of nearly $3 billion, that's about $3.5 billion US dollars, to finance mining, refining, and recycling projects.
Inside Europe and with partners.
Both. They've already identified promising domestic sites, especially around that big iron ore mine in Kiruna, Sweden. The whole thing is a textbook example of governments trying to rewire global supply chains to reduce their political vulnerability.
Okay, so let's shift from that large-scale geopolitical pressure to the intense, localized pressure on individuals and institutions when it comes to accountability. We're starting with some deeply disturbing allegations from the British Army Training Unit in Kenya, or Batuk.
Yes, a Kenyan parliamentary inquiry. It was conducted by their Committee on Defense, Intelligence, and Foreign Relations, and it has just exposed a devastating pattern of human rights violations, sexual misconduct, and environmental destruction linked to British soldiers there.
And this isn't just a few bad apples. The report suggests a culture of institutional resistance.
That's the key finding. The allegations include rape, assault, and the abandonment of children fathered by soldiers. But crucially, the committee found that Batuk showed significant institutional resistance and non-cooperation.
They kept invoking diplomatic immunity.
Constantly, to shield their personnel from local justice. The report details these awful, specific cases that just highlight the failure.
Like the killing of Agnes Wanjiru in 2012.
Her body was found in a septic tank. A former British soldier has finally been arrested, and extradition is underway, but it took years. Then there's the case of Tilam Laresh, who was allegedly shot and killed by a Batuk officer just for hurting his livestock.
And this obstruction has a history.
A long one. An internal inquiry from 2003-2004 into rape allegations. They just seized the evidence and dismissed the complaints, never published the findings.
And on top of that, there's the environmental damage. A 2021 military exercise caused a fire that just engulfed over 10,000 acres.
It destroyed habitats, displaced residents. So the committee's recommendations are powerful. They want a new code of conduct, a survivor liaison unit, and real mechanisms to hold soldiers accountable for child support. It's a clear case of fighting against strategic resistance to accountability.
That resistance in Kenya really contrasts with a cautious but new attempt at dialogue in the Middle East.
It does. For the first time since the latest war with Hezbollah, civilian representatives from both Lebanon and Israel attended a ceasefire monitoring meeting. It was at the UNIFIL headquarters in Nakora.
Was this just for show, or was there any actual progress?
It showed some potential, but everyone's being very guarded. Israel noted a positive atmosphere, even agreed to develop ideas for potential economic cooperation.
But Lebanon's prime minister immediately poured cold water on that.
He did. He stressed that normalization is tied directly to the 2002 Arab peace plan, which, requires the creation of a Palestinian state, so it's a long way off.
And the core conflict is still there. Israel demands Hezbollah disarm.
And Hezbollah says it won't even consider it until Israel withdraws from all Lebanese territory and stops its attacks, which are still happening almost daily.
This complexity around conflict leads us to a really fascinating legal point. It's about a case under review by Congress involving a Trump administration attack on a Venezuelan boat.
Yes, and the debate was about potential violations of the rules of engagement.
Right, and when you hear rules of engagement, you automatically think military law, international conflict, all that complexity.
But that's where this legal nugget comes in. A consensus of military law experts argue that the whole debate over the rules of engagement is effectively moot.
How can it be moot?
Because the targets were alleged to be civilian traffickers. They were not lawful combatants.
Yeah.
So if they're not lawful combatants in a defined armed conflict, then military law and the rules of engagement simply don't apply. The incident shouldn't be categorized as a wartime action.
It should be categorized
As homicide or murder on the high seas.
Wow. That completely shifts the legal ground. It moves it out of the complexities of military accountability and straight into standard criminal law.
Exactly. It removes all the protections and nuances of a military context and just classifies the alleged action as a crime.
Shifting to another area where pressure is forcing transparency, House Democrats released new photos and videos of Jeffrey Epstein's private island, Little St. James.
The one locals called Pedophile Island, yes. The photos were taken by law enforcement back in 2020.
And while they don't reveal new facts about the crimes, they give this disturbing, unvarnished look inside. Bedrooms, an office. There was that chalkboard.
Right, with the handwritten words.
Yeah.
Thin, intellectual, deception, power. And that strange room with a dentist chair and masks, which is notable because his last girlfriend was a dentist.
The release itself is a tactical move. It's about maintaining pressure on the Justice Department before a December 19 deadline to release more files. It's political pressure forcing transparency.
And we're seeing that kind of public pressure on the domestic front in Europe, too.
That's a good link.
In Bulgaria, the government faced these massive protests, over 100,000 people, after they introduced a controversial budget draft for 2026.
It included really sharp hikes in taxes and Social Security. The opposition demanded the government resign.
But the prime minister refused. He said that despite the unrest, political stability is non-negotiable right now, mainly because Bulgaria is scheduled to transition to the Eurozone on January 1st.
So again, high external pressure joining the Eurozone forces, an internal choice to maintain stability, even if it's politically painful.
Precisely.
Okay, let's leave the human sphere now and get to the final, really spectacular surprise in our stack. A discovery about an object that came from beyond our solar system. We're talking about 3I Atlas.
Only the second interstellar object we've ever detected in our solar system, and one of the fastest comets ever observed.
And the incredible part is its surface.
Yeah.
It appears to be covered in ice volcanoes.
It does. Astronomers recorded a sharp and lasting surge in its brightness. It wasn't just a flash, it was a sustained eruption of material from the comet's surface. That is evidence of cryovolcanism.
So it's ejecting liquid or vaporous water and other ices? That's so rare to see on a comet.
Incredibly rare. We usually think of comets as these, cold, pristine snowballs. So what's causing this violent eruption on something that's frozen solid?
That's the question.
Well, the mechanism here is what's rewriting the textbooks. This object is unique. It doesn't have the protective, dusty mantle we see on comets from our own solar system. Instead, it structurally resembles something called a carbonaceous chondrite.
Which is a very old type of meteorite, heavy in iron and nickel. So it's rocky, metallic, and icy all at once.
All at once. And the theory is, as this interstellar object got closer to our sun and started to warm up, liquid water inside the comet began to chemically corrode those microscopic metal grains.
It's a chemical reaction.
Yes, and that corrosion released trapped gases, mostly CO2, building up this massive internal pressure until it just violently erupted through cracks in the surface. And there are your cryovolcanoes.
So here's the big point. This discovery challenges the standard model of comet formation that we've accepted for decades.
Yeah.
What did we used to think, and why does this object shatter it?
The standard model basically said that comets formed in the cold, outer, relatively calm parts of planetary systems, like our Oort cloud. They were supposed to be uniform, dusty snowballs, formed by the gentle coming together of rock and ice.
And 3I Atlas is not that.
Not at all. It shows a far more dynamic, aggressive process. If you have liquid water chemically interacting with metals, a process that needs much more heat or sustained pressure, it suggests comets, even from outside our solar system, form under much more diverse and structurally complex, maybe even volatile conditions.
So the basic building blocks of planets might be inherently unstable and dynamic, not the calm, pristine objects we imagined.
Exactly. Interstellar objects like this are like cosmic artifacts. They force us to dramatically refine our understanding of how solar systems form, not just ours, but all of them.
So we've navigated geopolitical tightropes, from India buying Russian arms while chasing U.S. jet engines to the EU spending billions to escape China's grip. We've seen how legal and political pressure defines accountability, whether it's classifying murder on the high seas or forcing transparency on abuse in Kenya.
And the theme holds. The underlying theme is clear. Global pressure, whether it's economic, legal, or even geological, it always forces immediate adaptation. It forces strategic pivots. The world, and as it turns out, the cosmos, operates under far more complex and volatile rules than we often give it credit for.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. The discovery of aggressive cryovolcanism on an interstellar object like 3I Epsil suggests that the fundamental components of planetary systems, even far outside our own solar neighborhood, are inherently more violent and chemically interactive than we assumed. So if the building blocks of the universe are prone to these volatile eruptions, what other standard models of planetary formation, models that rely on calm, pristine conditions, are about to be shattered by these surprising interstellar visitors?